Chapter 9 The Death Experience. What happens at the point of death? The question is much more easily asked than answered. Basically, there is not any particular point of death in those terms, even in the case of a sudden accident. I will attempt to give you a practical answer to what you think of as a practical question, however. What the question really means to most people is this: what will happen when I am not alive in physical terms any longer? What will I feel? Will I still be myself? Will the emotions that propelled me in life continue to do so? Is there a heaven or a hell? Will I be greeted by gods or demons, enemies or beloved ones? Most of all, the question means, when I am dead, will I still be who I am now, and will I remember those who are dear to me now? I will answer the questions in those terms also then, but before I do so, there are several seemingly impractical considerations concerning the nature of life and death with which we must deal. First of all, let us consider the facts just mentioned. There is no separate, indivisible, specific point of death. Life is a state of becoming, and death is a part of this process of becoming. You are alive now, a consciousness knowing itself, sparkling with cognition, amid a debris of dead and dying cells, alive while the atoms and molecules of your body die and are reborn. You are alive, therefore, in the midst of small deaths. Portions of your own image crumble away moment by moment and are replaced, and you scarcely give the matter a thought. So you are to some extent now alive in the midst of the death of yourself, alive despite, and yet because of, the multitudinous deaths and rebirths that occur within your body in physical terms. If the cells did not die and were not replenished, the physical image would not continue to exist. So now in the present as you know it, your consciousness flickers about your ever-changing corporeal image. In many ways, you can compare your consciousness as you know it now to a firefly, for while it seems to you that your consciousness is continuous, this is not so. It also flickers off and on, though as we mentioned earlier, it is never completely extinguished. Its focus is not nearly as constant as you suppose, however. So you are alive in the midst of your own multitudinous small deaths, so though you do not realize it, you are often dead, even amid the sparkling life of your own consciousness. I am using your own terms here. By dead, therefore, I mean completely unfocused in physical reality. Now, your consciousness, quite simply, is not physically alive, physically oriented, for exactly the same amount of time as it is physically alive and oriented. This may sound confusing, but hopefully we shall make it clear. There are pulsations of consciousness, though again you may not be aware of them. Consider this analogy. For one instant, your consciousness is alive, focused in physical reality. Now for the next instant, it is focused somewhere else entirely, in a different system of reality. It is unalive, or dead, to your way of thinking. The next instant it is alive again, focused in your reality, but you are not aware of the intervening instant of unaliveness. Your sense of continuity, therefore, is built up entirely on many other pulsations of consciousness. Remember, this is an analogy, so that the word instant should not be taken too literally. There is then what we can call an underside of consciousness. Now, in the same way, atoms and molecules exist so that they are quote-unquote dead or inactive within your system, then alive or active, but you cannot perceive the instant in which they do not exist. Since your bodies and your entire physical universe are composed of atoms and molecules, then I am telling you that the entire structure exists in the same manner. It flickers off and on, in other words, and in a certain rhythm, as say, the rhythm of breath. There are overall rhythms, and within them an infinity of individual variations, almost like cosmic metabolism. In these terms, what you call death is simply the insertion of a longer duration of that pulsation of which you are not aware, a long pause in that other dimension, so to speak. The death, say, of physical tissue is merely a part of the process of life as you know it in your system, a part of the process of becoming, and from those tissues, as you know, new life will spring. Consciousness, human consciousness, is not dependent upon the tissues, and yet there is no physical matter that is not brought into being by some portion of consciousness. For example, When your individual consciousness has left the body in a way that I will shortly explain, then the simple consciousnesses of atoms and molecules remain and are not annihilated. In your present situation, you arbitrarily consider yourselves to be dependent upon one given physical image. You identify yourselves with your body. As mentioned earlier, all through your lifetime portions of that body die, and the body that you have now does not contain one particle of physical matter that it had, say, 10 years ago. Your body is completely different now than it was 10 years ago. The body that you had 10 years ago, my dear readers, is dead. You obviously do not feel that you are dead, and you are quite able to read this book with the eyes that are composed of completely new matter. The pupils, the quote-unquote identical pupils that you have now, did not exist 10 years ago, and yet there seems to be no great gap in your vision. This process, you see, continues so smoothly that you are not aware of it. The pulses mentioned earlier are so short in duration that your consciousness skips over them merrily, yet your physical perception cannot seem to bridge the gap when the longer rhythm of pulsation occurs, and so this is the time that you perceive as death. What you want to know, therefore, is what happens when your consciousness is directed away from physical reality, and when momentarily it seems to have no image to wear. Quite practically speaking, there is no one answer, for each of you is an individual. Generally speaking, of course, there is an answer that will serve to cover many issues of this experience, but the kinds of deaths have much to do with the experience that consciousness undergoes. Also involved is the development of the consciousness itself, and its overall characteristic method of handling experience. The ideas that you have involving the nature of reality will strongly color your experiences, for you will interpret them in the light of your beliefs, even as now you interpret daily life according to your ideas of what is possible or not possible. Your consciousness may withdraw from your body slowly or quickly, according to many variables. In many cases of senility, for example, the strongly organized portions of personality have already left the body and are meeting the new circumstances. The fear of death itself can cause such a psychological panic that out of a sense of self-preservation and defense you lower your consciousness, so that you are in a state of coma, and you may take some time to recover. A belief in hellfires can cause you to hallucinate Hades conditions. A belief in a stereotyped heaven can result in a hallucination of heavenly conditions. You always form your own reality according to your ideas and expectations. This is the nature of consciousness in whatever reality it finds itself. Such hallucinations, I can assure you, are temporary. Consciousness must use its abilities. The boredom and stagnation of a stereotyped heaven will not for long content the striving consciousness. There are teachers to explain the condition and circumstances. You are not left alone, therefore, lost in mazes of hallucination. You may or may not realize immediately that you are dead in physical terms. You will find yourself in another form, an image that will appear physical to you to a large degree, as long as you do not try to manipulate within the physical system with it. Then the differences between it and the physical body will become obvious. If you firmly believe that your consciousness is a product of your physical body, then you may attempt to cling to it. There is an order of personalities, an honorary guard, so to speak, who are ever ready to lend assistance and aid, however. Now, this honorary guard is made up of people in your terms, both living and dead. Those who are living in your system of reality perform these activities in an out-of-body experience while the physical body sleeps. They are familiar with the projection of consciousness, with the sensations involved, and they help orient those who will not be returning to the physical body. These people are particularly helpful because they are still involved with physical reality and have a more immediate understanding of the feelings and emotions involved at your end. Such persons may or may not have a memory of their nightly activities. Experiences with projection of consciousness and knowledge of the mobility of consciousness are therefore very helpful as preparations for death. You can experience the after-death environment beforehand, so to speak, and learn the conditions that will be encountered.